before any of you that saw my last video asked, this was filmed before getting my helmet smashed in by that random guy in the street. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Another video about Brandon complaining about his M109R. Not quite. See, the 109 is the old school Chevy on the block that continues to age like a fine wine, but needs work to keep it in tip-top shape. And the more I ride it, the better it gets, and the more I appreciate it. But even after my undying love and loyalty to the 109, it has problems that I can no longer ignore. And hopefully, if you're watching this a year later after I've aired my dirty laundry, be assured that these issues have been addressed. So yeah, here are some things that need servicing on my 2007 Suzuki M109R. Let's talk about it. Now, full disclosure, most of the things that need servicing come from general wear and tear on the M109, although there are a few things I will mention later that could be considered a defect. But my 2007 109 in its current form has 38,000 adult miles, and while many newer bikes have accumulated more miles than I have in significantly shorter periods of time, the age of components on the 109 have degraded and now need attention. And I've put off a lot of maintenance on the 109 with the purpose of doing the work myself in an upcoming series. So be on the lookout for that soon, and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss it. Alright, so I'm going to start at the front of the bike, and then we're going to work our way to the back.
Now, I've never touched the forks on this motorcycle, but again, this bike has 38,000 miles on it, and things just wear out. But what I have right here on the right side, we have a leaking fork seal, and basically you can see where the fork seal is pretty much cracked, and basically all the oil that facilitates the fork doing its job, basically that's starting or beginning to leak out. Probably half of it's gone now, probably more than that. But over time, you get like dirty brake calipers. You get just an oily residue all over the caliper. If it sits too long, you can probably end up damaging the forks further, but more likely this whole fork is going to need to be rebuilt. And if I'm going to take one fork apart and change the seal, I might as well change the seal on the other side, or perhaps even rebuilding it. But yeah, I don't know the common mileage that fork seals normally get, or really forks on other bikes, but this one's shot.
My brakes, for the most part, they're good, although they do have a bit of uneven wear. I'm gonna assume that is from the leaking fork seal on the rotor. It's pretty damn awful, but that's where we are on it.
Then we got these brake lines. Now, if I recall correctly, and I don't remember the exact number, but Suzuki recommends replacing these at some point, because just like anything like rubber, these are rubber. Just like a tire, tires get old and eventually they dry rot. And over time, you're gonna want to eventually change these out, because what happens is you don't want to end up leaking brake fluid and causing a problem down the road. Yes. I can't be up here? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'll leave now. Okay.
Well, that took an unexpected turn. I thought it was okay to be in an empty parking deck with the gate open, but I was still trespassing. That's my bad. Learn from my mistakes, people.
So I 100% got kicked out of that last spot. Apparently I wasn't supposed to be up there because it was a private parking deck. I figured because it was open and there was no security, because the gates were up, I figured it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but apparently it was. But I'm sorry, folks. Didn't mean to trespass. But we shall continue.
On the brake lines, I wanted to add that Suzuki recommends replacing the brake lines every 4 years, no matter whether or not you're riding or not. And I've never changed mine out. So that's a pretty big no-no. And again, the reason being is because they're rubber. The rubber lines, just like tires, they dry rot.
But as you can see on this side, the fork seal here, it's looking fairly good, but at some point actually I see it, it's starting to crack right in there, so it's going to start leaking as well at some point.
The brake feel, on the other hand, feels okay, but it could be better, and the master cylinder will need to be disassembled and greased. But before I made that trip to Orlando back in November, I did bleed the front brakes and of course got all the air out, but I skipped the rear master cylinder because the radiator cover has to be removed to add new brake fluid. It's just a pain in the ass and I didn't feel like dealing with it. But jumping over to the other side with the stock clutch cable, as of late the clutch lever hasn't been giving me too much confidence that the cable won't snap at some point. And of course I could adjust it again to make it tighter, but I feel like that will probably give it more reason to pop, just like it did on my Suzuki M50 when I first started riding. But I'm gonna tell you, it's not fun riding home without a clutch and having to time lights and stop signs just so the bike doesn't cut off. But that cable will be changed out with the clutches, but more on that later.
Next up, we are moving to the exhaust. So if you didn't know, behind this exhaust is the valves, and between the valves and the exhaust are gaskets. And at some point, just like rubber and just like the brake line right there, you can see my fork seals, they're leaking terribly. That has to be changed out. And the reason why is because air gets in between the exhaust and the valves, and it causes something called a deceleration pop. And you can listen to this right here, which is an example of it.
The deceleration pop could also come from bad spark plugs, since they are due for servicing, and Suzuki recommends those be changed every 12,000 miles. But changing the spark plugs out is very trivial and easy, and you know, the deceleration pop is, right now it's just a simple mild annoyance, but at some point I'm definitely gonna have to take care of it.
And moving on to this clutch. Now here's the big whoop. So the clutch, while it is fine, again, if you're gonna change the cable out, you might as well change the clutches out. Because what happens is, if you have a stronger cable, it tends to make the clutches go out faster. Now my fourth gear is beginning to slip. It's not bad, but if you're gonna do some hot riding, it's gonna slip in fourth gear. So I could ride with it the way it is, or I could eventually just change it out. More likely, I'm probably just gonna go ahead and change it out, have that solid number, 40, 45,000, like, okay, I changed them out at 40, 45,000 miles, and go on from there. The question is whether or not I'm gonna go with a stiffer plate or go with stiffer springs. More likely I probably will, because, I mean, I've ridden this bike kind of hard, but I will say for stock clutches, for me anyway, 30,000 miles isn't bad at all. I mean, almost 40,000 miles on stock clutches is really good. And I've had clutches to go out on my first Suzuki, which was a Suzuki M50, and they gave me an issue at around, I think it was 10,000 to 12,000 miles, and I had that clutch cable pop around that mark too. So, you know, it really depends. Some people get a lot further, a lot more miles on stock clutches. Some people don't, but me, I've gotten almost 40,000 miles on this, and I could go further, a lot further, but it's just whether or not I want to deal with that fourth gear.
And while we're on the clutches, I had to bring up clutch shudder. Essentially, it's an issue where the clutch plates are starved of oil, causing them to stick together. And it's a common thing on the 109s, which led to many forum members doing something called the push pin mod. And that involves modifying the pin in the clutch housing by slightly shaving part of it off, which would allow more oil to get to the plates. But if you modify it too much, you end up starving the heads of oil. But I did attempt to show what clutch shudder looks like. Basically, it looks like your tires bouncing, and that's because the power isn't being transferred to the wheel. But today, my clutches decided to act good for the camera. However, if you do listen closely, you can hear the sound coming from the clutch housing. And I've dealt with clutch shudder for a long time and just simply learned to live with it by giving a slight throttle preload when hitting the clutch friction zone. But new clutch parts and shaving the push pin in the housing will help with this. Now behind these panels on the engine, there's something that few will mess with, and that's the valve clearances. And making sure those are in spec is one of the most expensive jobs for a motorcycle. And it's something that I want to learn to do, and of course save money in the process. But the easy and fun part is tearing the bike down when you don't have to go to a trip the night before. Tearing the bike down to get to the valves, and the steady hands and stress comes with adjusting them if necessary. But Suzuki recommends valve clearance checks every 24,000 miles, and at 38,000 miles, I'm long overdue, so that's definitely gotta happen.
And another thing you can't really see, and I don't know if I can really get this on camera, and it is probably the most significant M109R maintenance mod that you can do. You can see that right there in between the blue. That is a motor mount. The motor mounts on this bike need to be changed, but those are the rear mounts. So for those of you that are looking at an M109 or have an M109R, the first thing to go on the motor mounts are the two front motor mounts. And the reason being, they're softer than the other four that are on here. So there are six. I think there's two in the rear, two at the bottom, and two in the front. But the two in the front are a different compound than those in the back and on the bottom. What ends up happening, they wear out and it causes unnecessary shake in the chassis. Now the telltale sign, and this is something that I can't really tell you what it feels like because I don't know what a M109R feels where it's not having this issue. You get vibrations in the 3,000 and 4,000 RPMs, and something that you can visually look, other than looking at the motor mount itself, is this right here. So this lets you know whether or not your engine is moving within the chassis. You see how there's no gap there? and there's a gap there. This is the telltale sign for all you M109 owners. You guys can see that if you have this split right here, this lets you know that your motor mounts need to be changed. Now, I've had the motor mounts for this bike for several years, but I never had the courage to jack the bike up and do it. I'm gonna do that. I need to change these, and I'm gonna get that all on camera for you guys. But I think the two up front are right. I think you can see it. It's right in there. I think that's it. Somewhere. Yeah, somewhere in there. But yeah, they got to come out, and they have to be changed. Now, something that I know a lot of you don't think about, because and the only reason I'm bringing this up is because I've gone through it myself, is draining your tank, changing the fuel filter, and coating the inside of your tank with a rust prevention solution. Because what ends up happening over time, and again, this is from my first experience on my first bike, and this happened on the bike with a lot less miles, the inside of the tank, from gas buildup and moisture, it ended up causing the inside of the tank to rust out. And this also happened on a sports bike I had, which was also a Suzuki. The inside had completely rusted out, and also the fuel filter. And what you end up having to do, you got to take your tank off, you got to drain it, and basically you clean it and you coat the inside of it with a solution that prevents rust. Now, you can look at this tank and say, oh, that's not that much of a problem, but when you take my gas cap off, you can see all the gunk that's around the gas cap. Now, you can't tell me that some of this stuff hasn't made its way into the gas tank and the fuel filter at some point, but it doesn't hurt for you guys to at least look and see whether or not you have gunk around your gas cap, and don't ignore that sign, because again,
Gotta make a correction here. I meant to say ethanol. Ethanol, gunk, and moisture buildup, not gas. You need gas for your motorcycle to run. Back when I first bought my first motorcycle, the 2006 Suzuki M50 that you guys never got a chance to see on the channel, it had constant issues with the fuel injectors. But long story short, it had rust at the bottom of the tank that clogged the injectors. But after 3 shop visits for the same injector cleaning, I finally realized that I needed to drain my tank of the rust deposits. And I coated it, and I never had that issue again. But currently, I don't have any power loss or injector issues on the 109, but that's something that I'll be doing as preventative maintenance and peace of mind. And here's a fellow motorcycle cop stopping by to show his maneuvering skills and check me out, talking to myself. He smiled off camera. Okay, getting back on track. Now we have the rear rotor. Now all M109Rs come from the factory with floating rotors, and this is where I'm getting into that possible defect area. And what that means is they're connected by the centerpiece to the hub and the braking surface, which contacts the brake pads, being connected by the rivets. And the problem is eventually the rivets come loose, and this happens.
Hear this? So that is the play in my rotor.
And that's a lot of excess play, right? And after scrubbing the forums, I found out that it's not uncommon for this to happen, and the fix is simply to replace it or force the rivets back together with the press. And many people, when they first got their 109s, they were able to get this replaced under warranty, but being that mine is significantly out of warranty, never really even had one. I bought it in 2014 and it's 2007. It'll probably end up being changed out by me at some point. But until then, I think I'm okay. And since this is a liquid cooled engine, it has a radiator. And I gotta change that fluid to keep the beast in tip top shape to slay those inferior adversaries that wanna leap out and try some. But to get to the radiator, I'll have to remove the tank, the side panels, and the radiator cover to get to my fill areas on both sides, and of course check the hose for any leaks or degradation. Then we do the process. We drain it, we fill it, we burp it, boom, satisfied. That's right. And I know what some of you are probably thinking, hot damn, Brandon is riding on a speeding metal death trap. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. This is my shit box. You guys would not call it a shit box, only I will call it a shit box. It's my shit box, and she's beautiful. And to be honest, most of these issues are just compounding over time, right? It's just like everything is just falling apart all at the same time. But I feel like the biggest thing that needs to be addressed right away is definitely that fork seal, because again, the fork seal is leaking on the brake pad and the rotor, so that's not good. But I feel like everything else is kind of just monotonous at this point. But either way, we're gonna take care of it. But besides other routine things like changing the tires and cleaning the K&N air filters of oil residue and gunk, and of course tightening loose bolts and greasing things, I feel like we're good to go. But a full detail on the 109's paint is in the cards soon as well, not to necessarily make it a beauty queen, but to simply show it some appreciation. You know, you should subscribe and stick around so you don't miss that, and of course the Bicasso way of doing maintenance. But yeah, this is pretty much my 109 and pretty much everything that's currently wrong with it. But as always, thanks for watching and giving me your time, and of course I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.